Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the next edition of the DFS Down Under Show, presented by Draftstars. My name is Smatho. Next to me is the big Hef. Welcome back to our viewers to the live stream. Also, welcome back to our viewers who are watching the replay. We're up to round 11. We weren't sure what we were going to do tonight, Hef, in terms of what game we were going to preview, but the AFL pulled through. We still have the Bulldogs and Demons on Friday night. Welcome to you, mate. How are you going?
All business as usual at the moment, isn't it, Smatho? No crowds, which is a bit disappointing, especially for such a massive game as Melbourne and the Dogs coming up. But at least we've got footy to talk about. We've got a full 9 rounds for anyone playing sort of season-long stuff. Straight into it.
Yeah, there were some worrying times for our season-long crowd in the last couple of days, thinking, oh my goodness, the buys have come early. I haven't planned this at all. But that's the beauty when you play Draftstars. You can just hop in anytime in any of the contests that are available on Australia's #1 platform for Australian New Zealand customers playing AFL Daily Fantasy. Both Hef and I use the data tools here at dailyfantasyrankings.com.au. So we'll refer those throughout the show. And we're up to around 11. And obviously, before we start getting into the footy in terms of breaking down to our Friday slate, we always give a little shout out to our golden ticket winners who are coming to Melbourne for the golden ticket, $300,000. Look at these people who have joined us. Brody, the boy, he's in. He got his 2 finally, got his 2 last week. George knows, Crystal Bros, Buddy Love 23, Elves. David didn't win his golf ticket. I was so pumped for the golf, but missed out there. And then the 3 guys I want to highlight who gave up their time during the week to have a chat with myself is Jason Miggs, Tedder, and KFC 121341. Now, I found out about KFC today. Where do you reckon he's got his username from?
I've got nothing. I can guess he's probably related to the Colonel, is it?
Yeah, yes.
Colonel related? I don't know the number. You feel it's on the number?
Yes, we found out the number. So make sure you get to Playbook on the Draftstars site. If you want to find out is this particular username, his interview will probably go up next week. But he alluded to the fact that 121341 was his PIN code when he's working at KFC. So he said when he first signed up for Draftstars, he just assumed that his username would just be like his login. It turned out to be his actual username itself, and he couldn't change it.
There you go.
So well done to all those participants.
Wish you'd told me that before. I would have got you to ask him if he remembers the Yum cards I used to have at KFC. I actually did reset a Yum card because I got too many points on it through college. They gave me a mobile phone. It's just a random story. I want to give a shout out in terms of tickets to a battler, Liam Swan, because this guy was basically a home and hose for a ticket. He just had to dodge a 75, I think it was, from Waitman, the flea for the Dogs.
Yes.
And he ended up on 71. Looked like he was going to get it pretty easy and then just ran out of puff that last quarter. So he thought he'd won by 3, and then the dreaded adjustments came in and they found a tackle somewhere for the flea. It took him from 71 to 75 and knocked poor old Liam out by a point. No prizes for seconds in the ticket contest, is there, Smatho?
No, you're either first or last in this. Look, I'm an avid watcher of the leaderboard and always take umbrage to Liam Swan's plights, thinking he's got it. He's finally over, but usually adjustments gets him, and then got him again. So unlucky, mate.
Big shout out to Brent in the comments there. I always feel really guilty when I bring up these adjustments stories because we know Brent copped a particularly nasty one a couple of years ago. There's just nothing you can say when it comes to something like that.
No. Now, for guys whoever who offended by language, just shut your eyes. But yeah, that's what Brent said. Yeah, stuff that.
He's a champion, Brent.
All right, so as a little sneaky 2 thumbs up for those guys. Hopefully, I'll give 2 thumbs to Liam Swan. Stick at it, mate. Now, we're all here for the $75,000 Bulldogs versus Demons contest. $7,415 for first prize. 7:50 p.m. start. Let me go through some news here for you, Hef. So, Dogs are a $1.68 favourite. They were a coin flip at the start of the week. I was quite keen on what the bookies will say at the start of the week, but the money has come for the Doggies. 6.5 is the line. 164.5 is the total at the moment. Now, we're at Marvel Stadium. You said there's an empty stadium, but they're going to open the roof. So will we see some dew for the big event? I'm not too sure there. So this is going to be different there.
Is that happening? Opening the roof at night?
Correct.
Wow.
Yep. Part of the conditions, apparently.
Well, at least the sun won't be out.
Yeah, no, it won't be. It won't get blinded by the sunlight. Timmy English, Lipinski, and a debut for Riley Garcia for the Dogs. Out goes Mitch Hannon with a calf. Treloar with an ankle. He's gone for a while. Scott's out with one of the cheapies, and Lewis Young was the sub, so he's out. For the Dees, Salem was laid out last week, but now he's back. Neville Jetta. Geez, in Sir Duckland Nichols round, he's a bit stiff. He's been omitted. Any thoughts on the teams there that came out earlier today, Hef?
Pretty like for like there. Salem for Jetta. Obviously, Jetta's a bit more defensively minded than Salem, but really good spot for Salem to come back. We'll touch on that a bit later. The Dogs, I think if you look at it, English replacing Hannon up forward. They didn't play a second ruck really last week, the Dogs, so English will obviously take that role. Lipinski in for Treloar, whether he takes Treloar's role or that more so goes to Hunter and Smith, like we've talked about before, in terms of the Doggies. And then Garcia looks like he's going to take that Scott role of forward, half forward flank. He's quite pacey player, actually, Garcia. We'll talk about him later too. So not a huge amount of structural change for either side there.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at the notes from Daily Fantasy Rankings in terms of our points against. That's usually one of the first tools I look at. And my notes for tonight, here we go. So Bulldogs are number one in the league for the season for disposal accumulate. Like that means fantasy points. Demons are one in the league for contested possession. So if you think the likes of Vine and Petrarca and Clary Oliver, they get contested possessions as a team. They're number one in the league for that. Demons are number one in the league for tackles as well, which goes part and part of the contested possessions. Both teams in the bottom four for disposals conceded, so they are pretty tight. Types of fantasy scoring as well. And the fantasy wasteland for opposition ruckman, which we kind of know over the years. If you go up against Max Gawn, you're going to have a very hard time. Any other notes that you kept being picked out of the tools on DFR?
Well, what's interesting about the Demons, we talk about how good they are in terms of contested possessions and tackles. The area you sort of want to target against the Demons is also contested possessions and tackles, which sort of implies that the whole game, they tend to have a very contested style of game. Obviously, the Bulldogs we've spoken about a couple of times on this show, and if of what little points they do give up, it tends to be weighted towards those outside players more so than the contested beasts. So it's going to be, I reckon, it's going to be on for young and old in these contested situations because the Dogs are very good, and obviously the Dees are too.
Yeah, look, they're on the first and second ladder for a reason there, Hef. So it's going to be a cracking game. Shame about the atmosphere, but look, there's still fantasy contests to get into. And let's have a look here. Here we go. The Draftstars lobby is coming up here for this particular contest. $75,000. There's also a $5,000 fiver, the mini, the micro, the high roller, and obviously the golden ticket qualifiers as well. So let's get stuck into. First of all, the ruck. And my notes here are pretty basic here. Well, not basic, but it's pretty clear cut that what we're going to look here is opposition ruckmen have a hard time against Max Gawn, even against Jackson as well. Here are the number one fantasy scores for the ruckman throughout the season already. We've got a 26, a 54, a 78, a 64, a 65. Nank came out and hit 91. Then we've got a 57, 74, 62, and 63. Meanwhile, Gawn has gone 8 out of his 9 games over 100 fantasy points. 16,220. Is it just simple lock him in and move on, or do we look at these other 3 options?
Well, you wouldn't turn anyone off playing Gawn here. Obviously, the Dogs have been reasonably easy to score points against in the ruck. Not as easy as they have been in past seasons, but you would have to think that Gawn is probably, he's probably going to get 110 pretty comfortably. You would think. Now, in Sweet's favour is he's a genuine ruckman. He's a big fella, Sweetie. He's still only 9,000, so for him to get somewhere near value, it's not like you're coming up against a proven ruck who's priced up there around the $12,000 mark. So it's going to be very hard for Sweet. English is going to chop him out. I was looking into how the big forwards go against these two sides, because that's where we sort of look at English and Jackson. Interesting that the Dogs have given up points this year to big forwards, which is a tick for Jackson. I think Jackson, you see there, he's had a few good games. He does get a lot of ball for a young ruckman. He's quite athletic and well skilled. So I think he is playable, Jackson. In terms of big forwards against the Dees, there hasn't been much all season, actually. The Dees have been very good at restricting the opposition big forwards, which makes it harder to play English. So for a number of reasons, I'm sort of leaning the Gawn or Jackson as the top two choices, and then I'd prefer Sweet over English, especially English coming back from that big knee in the head. It can take players a little bit to get over that. So Gawn's the easy option. Jackson, and to a lesser degree, Sweet, playable if you need to save cash.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I would rank him 1, 2, 3 in that order. I would start my teams with Gawn. If you don't like him, then you can always come back and put Jackson back in, or Sweet if you want some more midfield powder. But I'm just going to rely here on Gawn's getting that 110 and moving on. All right, let's move on to defense. So Bulldogs have stemmed their fantasy score. We've been talking about in Bulldogs games that they have leaked down back, let the chipping around. But the last 5 games I've seen on the tools on DFR that they have kind of conterred that a little bit. Mainly due because they had the ball against the Saints last week. Saints couldn't get a look in, and then they did restrict the power of the well as well 2 weeks before. However, I still think this is kind of an avenue where we can still attack, looking at Demons back. So let's start with Melbourne defensemen. Anything that pops out for you here?
Top of the list really stands out to me, Christian Salem. He just fits the bill when we're talking the guy who's going to get the uncontested ball in the back line for the Dees. It's always Christian Salem. He's the one they want to get the ball in his hands. So even though he's priced pretty well up there at 13,000, he's having an absolutely superb year. He's had a week off just to freshen up. And look at those numbers; they are superb. It's almost a bit like when we go through and we talk about Tommy Stewart for the Cats. Salem is the number one guy by a bit of a streak. If I was going to look at someone a bit cheaper, I like the style of Trent Rivers, around that $8,000 mark. I think he's pretty reasonably priced. He doesn't have a massive ceiling, but he does sort of accumulate some cheap balls. So if I'm looking to go a bit cheaper, he's the guy. And then we always like to find these guys at the back and forward positions who are playing a lot in the midfield, and the guy that fits the bill there is James Harms. He's in there at 10,000, which is pretty cheap for a guy who's, if you look at those scores, he's gone over 80 every time, which is an excellent return in a single slate for a guy that price. So I'm a little bit concerned because he will be most likely playing in the midfield against the Bulldogs, and we know how hard that has been for everyone, unless your name's Jack Sinclair, who somehow got a ton last week. But yeah, he's got the role, and he's got the scores behind him, so he's very playable as well, James Harms.
All right, let's talk about the Dogs. The two really consistent guys we got here is Caleb Daniel at 12,320, and just under him is Bailey Dale. Both have been pretty consistent in terms of fantasy scoring for the year. Look at Daniels there. Nothing under these last 4 games there have been pretty good. Bailey Dale seems to just come in and out, but 108 last week in the season's best. Both at 12K. Good options to get one of them in, or not quite sure in terms of when you're coming up against Melbourne?
Yeah, this might be a leak of mine, I don't know, but Bailey Dale I can't have at 12,000. It was a massacre last week. His other 100 was in a massacre basically a massacre against Gold Coast when they put that game to bed very early on. He's very good at getting involved when the heat's out of the game. I don't think the heat's going to be out of the game here. It may be a bit harsh because he did score 93 against Richmond, but there isn't a whole lot of of upside with him at 12,000, and it's Bailey Dale after all. Like, he could definitely drop a 60 or something and just sink your lineup. So if I'm spending money there, I'd much prefer Caleb Daniel. He's got a much better track record. Ownership's probably going to reflect that. Guys like Bailey Williams and Crozier there, they both have sort of 80 plus upside of that 10,000. So they're similar to Harms, probably a little bit riskier than Harms, but they're on a similar sort of value salary there. I think I'll be concentrating more on the Dees though. I particularly like those three that I mentioned earlier. And then the Dogs, I don't think there's any great value. I think you sort of know what you're getting, and there'd be more guys that I'm just putting in and hoping to catch a big game from.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to follow your lead here with your Trent Rivers, Cole. I do like that. Do the salary saving, and then I'll come up to Christian. He can go in there as well. So, excellent. There's our backline now. Let's move on to the mids. And look, superstars in here. Look, obviously the loss of Treloar brings in a debut for Riley Garcia. So let's talk about him first off the bat, because it looks like he's going to appear in a lot of lineups. So guys are going to be clicking on his name, want to know who he is. So give the viewers a bit of an insight on who is Riley Garcia.
So I'm going to pretend to be a VFL expert. From what I can tell about Riley Garcia is he went pretty low in the draft a couple of years ago. He did do a knee. He did have some raps about him. He's like a nuggety, speedy, think Luke Dalhouse style player. He's coming off some really good scores in the VFL. He's sort of around that 80 to 90 range. Now, I think we're going to see him play as a pressure forward predominantly here. We know how tight there is the competition for spots in the Dogs midfield is. So I think we'll see him predominantly forward, which is going to make it hard for him to get a really big score. But at 5K, he's a good tackler. His kicking needs a bit of work, but that doesn't really affect us too much from a fantasy viewpoint. So he can find the ball. He's a good tackler. He's going to be really popular given how many good fantasy players we've got in this game. And I can't really say not to play him at 5,000.
Yeah, it's go hard. MC's here today. We're starting to go, Dogs. So welcome to you, Mark. Thanks for jumping by. So obviously, when we talk about like in NBA or NFL, when a player goes out, we look for the guys who kind of step up. So with no Treloar there, give us some guys who are going to take that opportunity in the Dogs midfield. We know about the Bont, we know about McRae, we know about Libba, but who's that fourth or fifth guy who's going to come into the midfield to go head-to-head in those contested ball with the D's?
Well, if we look at centre bounce attendances, the last couple of weeks, Treloar, 2 weeks ago, he was down to 30-odd%. He was getting his numbers up pretty high, but Bailey Smith was preferred. He was over 50% in that match. And then last week, he was up to 63% with Treloar obviously injured. So he was the guy that picked up the slack. They seem to work with a pretty strong five-man rotation in Sweets, McRae, Bontempelli, Libba, and then Smith's the fifth guy there. So I wouldn't expect that to change too much. Lockie Hunter got a look at a few last week. He might pick up a few crumbs there as well. And then, yeah, there's not a whole lot left that Treloar had. Lipinski's the guy who comes in. We've spoken before when Dunkley was injured, actually. We thought Hunter would go to a wing and they'd put Lipinski on that half-forward role. His scores are pretty reasonable even when he's not in the midfield, Lipinski. So at that $8,000 price, there is the chance if they like this role that Hunter has, and then they think, well, we can give Lipinski a bit more midfield time than everyone expects, there is massive upside at that 8K salary. If he does sort of get the burn, the 80 to 100 is right in his range, Lipinski. So, yeah, that's where I see the slack being picked up from Treloar out of the team.
Okay. All right, let's look at the top end of town again. So Jack McRae at 16,530, 153 last week in the absolute smashing against the Saints. Look, I don't think that would happen here against the D's, so I wouldn't set my expectations there. Clayton Oliver, also he went Coco Bananas at 155 as well. So if you had the cash at over 16, who are you picking?
I'm leaning McRae.
McRae? Okay, brilliant.
Yeah,
All right.
but I actually think there's a chance to get away from the top end here. Bulldogs are very hard to score contested, to accumulate contested possessions against. So on that basis, it's going to be probably one of the tougher games for Oliver and Petraka this season. We know they're both absolute dynamite in the contest, but there's only one team harder to get contested possessions against than the Bulldogs, and that's Geelong. And another point about the Bulldogs is that you can't tackle them. They always get those handballs out, and I think that's going to affect, especially Oliver, who we know is a great tackler and gets a lot of points from tackles. But the Bulldogs are very good at just getting the handball away and avoiding the tackles. They give up the least amount of tackles in the league. So I think that comes into play as well. On that basis, and we've talked about uncontested ball, I'll be looking at maybe an Ed Langdon at a bit cheaper. Probably going to be a bit less owned. You also look at even cheaper and risky, but with a bit of upside, Angus Brayshaw down below 10,000. He's probably burnt everyone in the world in terms of fantasy. But look, on the outside, we definitely see 80 plus coming from old Fizzshaw.
All right. All right. So let's be filling the Brayshaw action. Let's get up to Ed. I might just leave that blank for now as we move on to the forwards.
Well, just a quick one on the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
As we talked before about Melbourne giving up contested ball, it looks a really good spot for Tim Liberatore, I reckon, around that $12,000 mark. If we're going to get a really contested style of game, he's having an excellent year, Libber, and I think he's definitely in a good spot there.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the forwards. Now, my notes here saying that 164.5 total on a fast deck at Marvel brings in the key forwards. The likes of Aaron Norton, Tom McDonald, even Alex Neil-Bullen come up at around that $11,000 mark, and I reckon you might want one of these guys to pop off if you're going to go off for the golden ticket or at least in those GPPs. Let's just touch on those guys to start with, for those single forwards. Any of these three that you'd be looking to target straight away?
Look, just on past history, it seems like big forwards are having a little bit more success against the Dogs than they are against Melbourne. So on that basis, I'd maybe be looking at McDonald. We know he's a very mobile player. McDonald does have really good scores at Marvel under the roof, which the roof won't even be on, but I don't think that matters too much. Very consistent apart from last week, so that might help with his ownership as well. People might be thinking, that's the Tom McDonald we all know and love. Can't hurt that he's just eating steak constantly, McDonald. It seems to have turned him around. I'd probably lean to him, but Norton is just having an unbelievable year as well. So he's going to be plenty for May to keep up with. I think I'd lean McDonald just because the ownership, it looks so much easier to play Norton than McDonald, but I don't think the gap's really going to be as big as what the field's going to think.
All right. If we scroll back up here, obviously Tim English here at 12.2. We've already discounted. Lockie Hunter, 11.8. So just remind again, we want contested Bulldogs, not outside runners.
Ideally, but that's pretty cheap for Hunter, and we're going to see probably more midfield time for him with the injury to Treloar. I don't think there's a lot of downside there with Hunter. I think he's just too cheap, really. I think he's probably more a $13,000 player here. And the fact we can play him as a forward, I think he's going to be really popular, but that's going to be for good reason.
Fair enough. All right, so say if we do go down that Hunter road, we need to find a guy down here in this probably $8,000, $7,000 mark. So you've highlighted Luke Jackson. Cody Waitman at $8,850. Obviously, sunk Liam Swan's hopes and aspirations last week. Also, you got the price bump there to 8.8. Could you go three in a row? Considering that now because Scott's out, they're bringing in Garcia. Bit more expectations on Cody?
Yeah, it does seem that it's very hard for these forwards to score against Melbourne, which is why I don't mind using Hunter in my forward line because we're getting a midfielder there. He's probably not too badly priced, Waitman. I think 70 is probably about his limit. A guy I'd probably prefer is, we've been a bit hit or miss on him. If you scroll down even further, Jason Johannesson.
Oh, yeah. Didn't he play?
He's probably going to be really popular from last week, but he's getting a lot more. He's been released a little bit more than, had a bit of a dirty forward role. I like the fact that he's tackling. Just starting to get into some form, and at 6,000, wow, it's he's 10x plus his last 2 matches, so it's not telling you anything out of the ordinary, but he's an obvious value guy here up forward. It's quite possible he's off a wing, Johannesson, especially with Treloar out of the team.
Yeah, so if I get to Jason Johannesson, that means I can come back in my bids and muck around, upgrading these guys probably to a 16K guy. So there are some good options here. Any other options here in the Melbourne forward line or even Bulldogs forward line that could pop for it? Because these middle guys here, Fritsch, Hunt, Smith, Spargo, Petty, Wilderman, they're all going to be under 10%. Easy.
Well, I don't mind rolling the dice on Wiedemann. As we've been talking about the bigger forwards, I think that's a guy at that price. He's only got to take 3 or 4 big marks, and Bob's your uncle. And he's obviously been a really highly rated player for a long time, Wiedemann. So I definitely don't mind rolling the dice on him. Luke Jackson, you could play a ruck stack if you really like Jackson. That's possible as well. I think Johannesson and Hunter is definitely going to be a popular way to go. And if I was playing one team for my life, that's the combo I'd go with.
Yeah, all right. Let me do a Lockie Hunter in there. It gives me 1740. That probably gets me up to the Bont from there. And I probably prefer to have more Bont than Langdon in my life, if I'm to be honest.
You've also got what if you could do... You could also do Brayshaw up to Bailey Smith as well, which would be an interesting way of looking at it. If you wanted to play Langdon, you could move the Bont back down to Langdon. And then you could go Bray. If you're not prepared to put everything into Angus Brayshaw, and I definitely wouldn't blame you for doing that, then there's an option there. You go the Smith and Langdon combo instead of the Bontempelli Brayshaw combo. But yeah, I feel a bit dirty turning you off Bontempelli. How good's he been?
Just writing it down now.
He's basically the best player in the comp, isn't he, Bontempelli? His game last week was unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. I didn't watch it, but I heard it was unbelievable, which was good because I turned it off pretty early, that Saints game, which is unfortunate. All right, Hef. Well, that wraps up our show for this. It's a very interesting game, this one, the Dees and the Melbourne. It's going to be a great game to watch. Unfortunately, as I said, no crowd in Melbourne. Hopefully we can get through another round of footy. What's on the agenda next week? Where are we at? We're at the buys next week. Are we back into Thursdays or Fridays?
Oh, Thursdays. We usually get Thursday games in the buys, don't we?
Yes, we do. Anyone out in the chat can tell us. Let me know.
I can look it up if you want.
All right. What we'll do. So make sure we get
the
day.
Will we know, though? That's the thing. Will we know? No, it's Friday night next week. Melbourne, Brisbane. Friday next.
All right. So we're back next Thursday for the round 12. So make sure you get the dayfantasyrankings.com.au for all your cheat sheets and data tools that you need for your Draftstars lineups. And make sure you get the draftstars.com.au to enter all the contests that are available for the AFL Daily Fantasy. I love to see that Jamie here has provided a fake news. It's Wednesday morning. I'm usually doing the school run, Jamie, but thanks for checking for that for us. Thank you very much. Hef and I will be back next week. Congratulations to all of our golden ticket winners. I look forward to seeing some more golden ticket winners over the weekend. Hef, thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you, Smatho.
We'll see you on the next edition of the Down Under Show. See you then. Cheers.